Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very, very good. It's been a very, very inspiring and impressive journey since we met in Bombay a few years ago.
Hey, and I think it's been quite a while, and I feel like I've had the opportunity of doing some new things as well. So maybe we could talk about that in detail when we get the opportunity.
Absolutely. I'm so looking forward to it. I have been listening to you and following what you have been saying. You talk about hope, and I love the way you spoke about it getting under our skin. I mean, the way you call out misogyny and patriarchy, how you fearlessly just articulate, your position on sexual rights. This voice that you bring in, Aranya, this very, very bold and fearless young voice. For us as an organization, we have been in a conversation on gender equality since 1992. Your young
Wow.
voice is so important.
Thank
It's
you so
real.
much. And honestly, I think to think of it that this has been on since 1992, and this is one of the many organizations that are working towards this movement. And I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but um, it's nice to see younger feminists and older feminists make space for each other. I
Yes.
really like when we speak to older feminists, the little I don't know insinuation of, oh, we take you under our wing, you'll be okay. If anyone doesn't talk to you properly, you let us know. So it's a community, and I think considering I've been raised, almost being like a pick me girl, where I didn't have a lot of female friendships when I was younger,
Hmm.
realizing that a lot of it came from like my own insecurities when I really went out and ventured actively to make more constructive healthy female relationships. So many of them came from just the movement in itself, which I think is such a beautiful consequence of standing for the right thing. You find other people who have been
Absolutely.
standing for even longer, especially with
Absolutely.
like especially with Sakshi organization, because y'all have been doing this since before I was born.
Yeah,
So
so what? 1997 is when we got the Vishaka guidelines, when we got the definition for sexual harassment at workplace for the first time. We didn't have a definition to describe that. Were you
and
born
to
1997? No, no, not really.
that is still so recently. It's not even been 30 years. So
Yeah.
to my mother, who is, I'd say like a generation apart, has lived a very different life, has seen a very different side of India than I have.
Yes. Hmm.
One is, one thing, even when I was reading Rega's post today, even what I shared on my story, she talks about how sometimes history can be a source of hope. So
Yes.
hopefully we will see, maybe by the time I get a little bit older, when I have an opportunity like this to maybe interview a younger poet when I'm a little bit older, I wonder what kind of things we will be able to talk about that we haven't reached yet, that we haven't accomplished as a nation yet.
No, I think there's a long way to go, and I think you're really taking long strides as well. I remember, when we started, when we did Sakshi versus Union of India, we didn't have a definition. The sexual assault definition was so limited, and we
Mm-hmm.
fought for expanding the definition of sexual assault to what it is today. From there to being able to actually stand up for state your sexual position, sexual rights. It is a journey which is ongoing, and I'm sure every generation is going to take this forward as we move along. One of the things that we were struggling with in our time was the interpretation. We even when we got the laws in place, the interpretation, like we established through our research, that there is this gender bias there in the interpretation of laws when we work with the judiciary. And at that point of time, and I'm so impressed because you're carrying it forward in the international arena as we had done. We had gone into the 5 countries within the region and worked with the judiciary, from Supreme Court, High Court, and District Court judges, in just to look at bringing in the gender perspective in the interpretation of the gender laws that we have. And now you're there at G7 and you are advising and tell me a little bit about that. That's like really fascinating for me.
Honestly, it was a very interesting opportunity. I was the youngest member, so I had the immense privilege of being in that room. As much as I'm contributing, taking back as much, learning as much, using it as an opportunity to better my activism, to see
Mm-hmm.
what does inclusivity mean. And especially, I think the G7 was a very good opportunity for me to look at inclusivity that didn't personally benefit any of the members, because
Right.
we realized that, our walks of lives are not the only walks of lives that matter. And, I'll tell you a very interesting, so all of the GIAC meetings happened in Paris. And when I'm in India, I am very aware of my privilege here. I'm very aware of my caste privilege, very aware of my class privilege. I realize, I've had a lot of opportunities that a lot of people don't have. But
Yes.
moving from being the majority in a country to a minority in another one was a very interesting experience.
Mm.
And I almost came from a place where my imposter syndrome was like, you don't deserve this. But the way I looked at it was, if I have been given this opportunity, it depends on me how I optimize it. So, for example, before we had, I think, 3 meetings, in-person meetings, and all of us, we communicated on email. And even though the legal bouquet that we put together was being
Mm.
pushed to G countries,
Mm.
there were some G7 countries that were also invited, such as India, Burkina Faso, and a bunch of other ones. And one of the things we decided that had so much power in our paper is that we realized we could define what we would put as a woman. So that means we could be queer inclusive, that means we could be trans inclusive. And that also gave us the opportunity for when we put up a law that says, certain percentage of, your legal structure needs to have women. It could include women that have been, BIPOC, that are people of color, that are immigrants, who all deserve an opportunity to have a say.
Mm.
And if you're talking about the contribution that Sakshi organization has had to this movement, has only happened because someone listened to someone that never had that voice otherwise. So
Absolutely.
when I was researching, I said, I know my perspective, I know the women who are like me, from the background like me, the kind of problems they face. But I know that what is it that I have not experienced, that I'm missing out on. So I had the very interesting conversation with my council, where I told them that, even though we say caste is dead in India, it is still very much alive. And the only way that we can approach this head on is by acknowledging that it's still very much a problem. And most of the people, say apart from 3 or 4 of us, were, I think only 3 or 4 of us were people of color. The rest of them were white people. And that's not surprising from a G7. And these are all, countries that have benefited from colonization. So, but it was so interesting because when I told them, I said, okay, since we're making a legal bouquet, we can't just put laws that the countries like G7s that already have, that would be, an addition. We
Mm.
need to put these laws, because if there is a non G7 country picking
Mm.
up a law, there should be something that is feasible for them. So,
Absolutely.
marital rape, laws against marital rape, we actively mentioned it because there are countries that still don't have laws against it.
Yeah.
So we tried best to be inclusive. It was very empowering to define what a woman was, because very often I think it is defined for us. Very often we are told to mold and fit into this idea. But when we had the power as a council of people who've come from different walks of lives, we had Nadia, who is a survivor of an ISIS sex slave ring. We had me being, a little brown girl that had, I felt like I didn't have a lot to contribute, but that's because I feel like I come from a country where we get this opportunity all the time, where
Some
we
of
get to
us.
talk.
Some of
Some of
us.
us, some of us, we get these opportunities, but I didn't realize what role I played as a young woman of color in a council that's majorly white. And
I'll tell you, just I'm sorry for interrupting you, but I
no,
think I really must plug this in over here, Aranya, because the role that you're playing is huge. Because right now we are engaged with we're in the process of engaging with about 40 lakh youth within the country in 40,000 colleges. each and every district in the country, right? And what are we trying to do over there? We're trying to enable them and equip them with information that will enable them to interrupt this cycle of violence, which is so internalized. You know, we don't
Absolutely.
even recognize it. So we're just trying to open up conversations. We're trying to give them that information. We're trying to make them talk, create content, make it their own, bring it out of their lives and put it out there so that we can actually own and understand and interrupt, okay, and resist. And that's what you're doing. So your voice is really important, okay? So never again do I want to hear you say, I don't know what role I'm playing. You're playing a very important role. You know, you are the hope and the
No,
voice.
and you're completely right. I feel like very often I take this opportunity for privilege of like for granted. I take, you know, all of these opportunities because I feel like a certain part of me feels like there are people who have it worse off. But I think one of the, you know, opportunities I had is either I could let this bog me down and feel like, oh, I don't deserve this, you know, like I don't know how they're going to benefit from having me, or I could use all the resources I have, educate myself well enough, be mindful of, you know, inclusivity. Even in our paper, when we were discussing, you know, what are the different things, you know, even something as little as a word makes a difference. So for
Absolutely.
example, the laws we were talking about was about making toilets for children in you know, smaller cities all over the world, and one word that made a difference was sanitized toilets, you know, accessible toilets, toilets that even people with disabilities can use. And it's small things like this that when we're reading we don't realize that it makes a difference. But if a country were to a law, as it were, they would have to check mark all of these things that would have otherwise been an afterthought. And
Absolutely.
it was so interesting there that a lot of the people that came, some were journalists, some were lawyers. And one thing that was really incredible is that this was organized by the French government,
Mm-hmm.
and the council had people that critiqued the French government, which I think India is very far away from being inclusive of voices that are willing to critique the government. And I thought, you know, that is a democracy where you look at someone critiquing a government as playing a vested interest in its nation, not as being, you know, unpatriotic. And even the conversations that they had, you know, one of them was a journalist named Caroline Forrest. And I remember she was telling us that she made an entire article critiquing the lady who headed RGAC, Marlene Schiappa.
Mm-hmm.
And Schiappa said, the only way I'm going to be a better activist, a better minister, is if I
Mm-hmm.
listen to the people telling me I'm not doing it well. And that's
Yes.
something that's how I want to look at it, you know. And I feel like, you know, especially being online, being an online creator, very often, you know, this has this element of getting called out for things. But I think I've been trying to focus more on if I have upset someone, where is the anger coming from? Because
Yes.
anger is such a great motivator for change. Anger is such a great first step to know what you care about, how you want to work like around it. So now, if I ever get, you know, someone messages me and they're like, "You didn't do this," or for example, I remember when I was posting about the Kashmir, you
Mm-hmm.
know, the happened last year. I was deciding. I said I have two ways of approaching this. Either I talk about what I feel, or I can use my platform and share other Kashmiri activists that are directly affected by this that may be a better voice. So I
Mm-hmm.
chose obviously the better option.
Mm-hmm.
But to me is this is my platform, and I have a little family here that I feel like I am responsible of making sure that the right news reaches them. It reaches them from the right people. Even when I'm trying to, you know, share posts about caste, I'm trying to be
Yeah.
mindful. Even when I was in school, you know, one of my
I mean, I
uh,
heard about your Discord that you're trying to start. Have you already started this?
we're actually releasing it tomorrow, but
Oh,
we're
nice. Okay.
everything up today. And even
Okay.
if you know, one of the things I'm doing is I'm going to be sharing sources. And one of my teachers that really got me into activism was my sociology teacher. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember that kid who was like, why does reservation exist? It's so unfair. But then she said, where have you learned about caste and what have you learned about caste? And I said, I learned whatever the textbooks have taught me. And she said, do you realize all of that is written by an upper caste person?
Mm.
And then that back and I said, all the news that I'm reading, who is writing it? When I'm reading about political news, who is writing it? Someone that benefits from it or someone that has
Yeah.
never lived? Someone
Yeah.
that is about it that could have given that opportunity to someone from the community. So
Yeah.
I feel like it's where I'm just learning a lot. And hopefully, even if I make mistakes, the way I'm looking at it is if I've made a mistake, I want to be able to acknowledge it publicly because it saves someone else from making that mistake. Which is,
Absolutely. Brilliant. And so correct, Aranya. It's so important to center the voices. This whole thing that we're talking about representation, it's really important that we actually center the voices that matter. I mean, I remember at that time when the Vishaka thing was happening, there were people from Sakshi who traveled across the country talking to women across the country, rural, urban, semi-urban, everywhere, because everybody wanted to know, just wanted to know what is their sense of justice, what is it that they want to do, what is it that they want from this particular law, and
right?
that needs to inform the law when you're actually writing it down. So I completely in sync with you. And since today is going to be an announcement, and this is just a sneak peek into what we are going to do on the 11th of October, I have one question for you over here, because COVID is giving us an opportunity to reimagine our world, right?
Yes,
I mean, we have a really rare opportunity, and transformation. If you want to reimagine the world, then transformation is not an individual exercise.
absolutely.
It's a collective action, right? It requires you and me and us to come together to be able to do this action. So, um, what, according to you, would be a tool of collective action to bring about the change that you want? So, my question has two parts. What is the change that you want to see? The
Mm-hmm.
reimagined change. And what is the
Okay.
collective action tool that you would like to put into place?
I think the change I'd like to see, it's a very short answer, but it's something that's hard to inculcate. I'd say empathy. I think we need to get people to care about people themselves, which is hard to do, especially I feel given the kind of life you live. A lot of people are so centered on, some people are, for example, if you are financially burdened or stressed, your priority is how do I get through the next day? How do I feed my family?
Yeah,
But if there's a little bit of scope for empathy that I feel like I saw a lot of when there were the anti-CAA and NRC
yeah,
protests, is that there were people that weren't affected by it, and upper class Hindus that were also protesting because they realized that their privilege played a part. And you can see it. You're seeing what's happening with Umar Khalid. You're seeing how privilege does play such a part in our current society, which is why I feel like empathy is such a strong tool. The minute you start telling people, hey, it's cool to care about other people, let's incentivize caring about other people, caring about causes, the better it is. And I feel like I have a love hate relationship with, more like, I mean, of course, a little bit more hate, but I love hate relationship with capitalism. But I feel like to a certain extent, all of these brands and social media has found a way to make causes palatable for a younger audience. But I think if that's what it takes to get some more people involved and hopefully in the process get more people motivated and passionate, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with being, like almost like a poster child, if that means that that representation gives me the opportunity of connecting them to more Dalit, Bahujan, Adivasi activists. But again, that falls on who are we making our heroes, which
yes.
is,
And whose
you know,
voices are we actually bringing in?
exactly, it's a community thing. Like when I look around, I see a lot of people like myself. And when I'm invited for a panel, I realize that if I wasn't there and any of my other colleagues went, I think we would have the same contribution. But the difference that comes in is that all of us, I'm seeing so many other activists, whether that's Priyanka Paul, whether that's Sukhnid, whether that's Rega, whether that's Divya Kandakari, everyone is trying to push each other. Everyone's realizing that even if one of us is winning, all of us are winning. And
Absolutely. Absolutely. Brilliant. So, is your new piece, I'm sure you're working on new pieces, but is your new piece around something like this? I mean, is it centering this thought?
interestingly, I'm approaching these causes now with not only poetry. I'm going to, hopefully October first week, I'm planning to start a video series based on these causes. And if Sakshi organization is interested in giving me a little bit more of a sneak peek of what's coming on the 11th, it'd be
Yeah.
amazing to work on something together. But
Brilliant.
the I feel like this video series is so important to me is because I feel like I anyway play a middleman with my social media. I feel like I'm the connector between activists that I feel like don't get enough, screen time, that don't end up on those many prime time debates, but are still doing constructive work, even grassroots
Yes.
activism. And
Yes.
people that are just getting into activism, people that are just following pages. It's a good in between. So right now I'm in this position where I feel like, poetry is still a very personalized form of storytelling. I want
Yes.
to be say, this is how I learned about caste and this is how I think you should too. So don't listen to me as an upper caste woman. Here's a bunch of, sources you can read, and just making it more accessible to people, because I
Brilliant.
think the minute someone is served something easily, it's more accessible to someone, they're more likely to click on it. They're like, oh, everything's here. I don't even have
Yes.
to do work. So I
Right.
want to that's accumulating all of the information, serving it on a platter and saying, let's all do this together and for each other.
Brilliant. 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 Is there some small piece that you would like to just recite for
Maybe
us?
with the poem as soon
Mm-hmm.
as this up. But I have been, I've been writing more. And in fact, one of the things I'm writing about is how like my name is Aranya, but very often when I go abroad, I pronounce my name as Aranya because that fits better in non-Desi mouths. And that conflict I'm having, do I want to be, do I want to compromise on how my name is pronounced, or do I want people to know my name? So it's a
Hmm.
very conflict I'm having that I'm trying to work through with writing. But I'll end with a short poem whenever we're about to wrap up.
Oh, great. So I think we will wrap up now in a bit. I'll just want to announce what we're going to be doing on the 10th and 11th of October. 10th of
Please do.
October, we 10th of October we are celebrating. We're going to be talking about it's a mental health awareness day, and we have poets, advocates, a very very interesting panel coming together in discussion. It's like an unplugged discussion, and on the 11th we have you, and along with you some more surprises are coming up. People that you know very well, people who have voices, people who are young and old coming together. And on the
Yeah.
26th of October is Sakshi's happy birthday. We will be 28
Oh,
on 26th of October, and we will be bringing together the youth that we have been working with so far across India. We will be bringing them a collection of those youth with people like you, so bringing the voices together in a conversation. So October for us is like really really exciting, and we're going to be exploring all together collective action. Which are the tools that we can bring together for collective action, so that, like what you said, Aranya, if one person is moving ahead, so are all of us,
all
and together we can reimagine this world. That's what we are looking forward to.
especially because these kind of causes sometimes feel really lonely until you literally look around and you realize everyone's fighting for the same thing. So definitely looking forward. I'm going to have maybe a little book open on the 10th and 11th. I'm just going to be noting everything down, making as many notes. But I'm looking forward to it, and I'm sure the rest of us are too. But I'll end one quick poem
Mm-hmm.
before we end. Um, so, okay. So this is a poem I did with Commune a few months ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's really close to my heart because I'm just genuinely proud of this piece. So, when duty calls and kingdoms fall, these women have been willing to risk it all. They've taken to the throne with grace, but still seem to be the part that history chose to erase. The weight of a crown never wore them down, whether it was leading cavalry or providing for their family. The weight of a crown never wore them down. Take a Rani who used her smarts to outwit the Brits, attempted to flip the script by using a doctrine against the people who created it. Think of it, a widow, single mother leading her troops, representing her roots, fulfilling her duties and promising a brave fight even if it meant they'd lose. With her son strapped to her back, with 2 swords and resilience, she attempted to attack. Although she never lacked, it was the doctrine of lapse that resulted in a queen having to surrender her land. And she may have died in vain, but we've attempted to keep alive her name. Or we could learn from another warrior whose legacy is often forgotten, led over 100 women to battle, which even now is uncommon. We learn from our womenkind every day that sisterhood means fighting for each other, whether it's against mindsets or against the state. These women proved that there's strength in femininity, that being a wife means more than her fertility, that being a male isn't a necessity or even an eligibility, to have the power to change and make his story history, to make his story her story, to make her story and her story. But we still don't hear stories of women who've shown, whether on field or on throne, that there's courage in vulnerability, that even traditional roles come with nobility, that being a wife, mother, sister, or daughter never comes in the way of being some other. We learn from our womenkind every single day, whether it's protest by retaliation, rejection, or protest through their identities and plain existence, whether it's protest by demanding mobility and position, whether it's women questioning and dismantling the system. Women show that there's femininity in resistance. There's a little bit of these women in you and me, a little bit of these women in everyone we see. Every woman that raises her voice to ask for what she deserves, you can almost hear an amalgamation of different voices echo her words. If you feel a restless twitch in your feet and you can feel the electricity in your bones, it's because you carry what these women wanted of the world for you. We're children of women just like you and me, looking for hope, finding it underneath our skin, within our bones, intertwined with who we know we can be. Thank you so much.
This is one of my favorite pieces of yours, you know. I mean, that's what I started with, this hope under the skin. I really love this. And I'm just going to give you back a little bit because I write a little bit. It says, दादी चाची नानी ताई बुआ मासी ननद बनने के पहले मैं एक औरत हूँ, देश की आधी इकाई, एक स्वतंत्र सोच.
Oof, beautiful. That's what I love. I feel like even in this poem, even in the, in your words, sisterhood really comes out in our work. We see, we recognize, we realize that there is strength together. It's easier to persevere. It's easier to continue to protest. So October's going to be a wonderful month for us to prove it, for us to come together and make some change that's going to impact a lot more than just us.
Thank you so much, Aranya. Stay tuned. Follow Sakshi on Instagram and Facebook for more action on and information on collective action to prevent gender-based violence, sexual violence, and specifically child sexual abuse, which we will talk about more on that day. Thank you so much.
Me.
It was lovely.
Thank you.